Welcome to LinesToGo installation videos. Today we will be removing and installing rear brake lines on a 2001 Honda Accord using LinesToGo part number BL-1108-SS. While this particular installation is being performed on a 2001 Honda Accord, this set of lines will also fit the following year, make, and models as shown on your screen now. LinesToGo lines are made using original equipment end forms and fittings that are CNC bent for an easy and precise installation. We have also upgraded to stainless steel braided Teflon hoses for rust protection and to prevent surface fouling. These have an unlimited shelf life and anti-static PTFE liner. This set of LinesToGo lines are made using 304L stainless steel for rust resistance that exceeds OEM standards. Tech tip: disconnect the battery before working on a vehicle to reduce the risk of shorting out the battery on tools or lines. LinesToGo lines are made with a sectional design for easier installation. We also use color-coded unions on our sectioned lines. Just match the colors at the connections. Make sure to depressurize the fuel system before starting the installation. Tools required: 10mm and 13mm wrenches, 10mm, 12mm, 17mm, and 19mm sockets and ratchet, cutting pliers, drain pan, jack and jack stands. The level of difficulty for this installation is considered to be easy. To depressurize the fuel system, locate the fuel pump fuse using your owner's manual and remove it. Start the vehicle and wait for the engine to stall. Make sure to replace the fuse once completed. Start by disconnecting the negative battery terminal using a 10mm wrench. Next, use a 10mm wrench to remove both threaded fittings from the top of the proportioning valve located behind the driver's side of the engine. Next, raise and support the vehicle and remove both rear wheels using a 19mm socket. Remove the plastic tray located underneath the vehicle that covers the lines. Note, the tray on this vehicle was damaged and not secured in the proper way. Use a pair of cutting pliers to cut both rear feed brake lines behind the front subframe and remove the front section of both rear lines from the vehicle. Cut both rear lines in front of the charcoal canister and remove the forward section from the vehicle. Beside the charcoal canister, disconnect the pressure and return fuel lines by pressing in on the plastic tabs at the quick connection. Next, we will need to remove the fuel vapor filter in order to have room to remove the lines. Use a 10mm socket to remove the bolt that secures the filter. Pull the filter down and remove the 4 hoses from the filter. Remove the filter from the vehicle. Use a 10mm socket to remove the 2 bolts that secure the front of the charcoal canister. Remove the 3 bolts that secure the exhaust heat shield using a 10mm socket and remove the heat shield from the vehicle. Use a pair of cutting pliers to cut the right rear line above the fitting and use a 10mm wrench to remove the fitting from the flex hose. Repeat these steps at the left rear. Place an adjustable support like a floor jack below the rear subframe. Use a 12mm socket to remove the bolts at both sides of the front subframe. Next, use a 17mm socket to remove the bolts that secure the front of the rear subframe. Carefully lower the front of the rear subframe. Use a flat blade screwdriver or socket to remove the clamp from the rear of the vent line and remove the hose from the line. Next, remove the hose connection at the top rear of the canister by pressing the plastic tabs to disconnect it. Remove the hose connection at the vent valve mounted to the canister. Use a 10mm socket to remove the bolt that secures the rear of the charcoal canister. Next, remove the 3 electrical connectors from the canister and remove it from the vehicle. Behind each of the rear flex hoses above the subframe, use a 10mm wrench to remove the bolt that secures the brake lines into place. Remove the right rear line from the plastic clips on the body and use a pair of cutting pliers to cut the line at the passenger side of the vehicle and remove the forward section of the line from the vehicle. Remove the remaining section of right rear line from the vehicle. Next, remove the left rear line from the plastic clip below the fuel line connection. Remove the final rear section of the left rear line from the vehicle. To begin the installation of your new stainless steel LinesToGo brake lines, start by installing the rear section of the right rear line labeled 06D into position. Start the threaded fitting into the top of the right rear flex hose. Replace the metal clip removed with the old lines and secure it using a 10mm wrench. Use a 10mm wrench to tighten the threaded fitting in the right rear flex hose. Install the next section of the right rear LinesToGo line labeled 06C into position. Start the threaded union noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection and secure the line into the plastic clips. Next, install the line labeled 06B into position and start the threaded union noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection. Tighten both threaded unions using a 10mm and a 13mm wrench. Next, install the rear section of the left rear LinesToGo line labeled 05B into position and start the rear threaded fitting into the top of the left rear flex hose. After replacing the metal clip located behind the flex hose, tighten the threaded fitting using a 10mm wrench. Secure the left rear line into the plastic clip. Connect the 3 electrical connectors on the charcoal canister. Use a 10mm socket to replace the 3 bolts that secure the charcoal canister into position. Connect the hose at the vent valve. Replace the quick connect hose connection at the top rear of the canister. Connect the hose to the rear of the vent line and secure the clamp using a flat blade screwdriver or socket. Install the fuel vapor canister and connect the 4 hoses removed earlier. Secure the fuel vapor filter using a 10mm socket. Connect the supply and return line quick connect fittings. Replace the heat shield and use a 10mm socket to tighten the 3 bolts that secure it. Raise the front of the rear subframe back into position. Replace the brackets that secure the front of the subframe using a 12mm and a 17mm socket and remove the support from underneath the subframe. Next, install the front section of the left rear LinesToGo brake line labeled 05A into position, routing it between the front subframe and the firewall. Start the front threaded fitting into the top rear port in the proportioning valve by hand. Start the threaded union noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection and tighten using a 10mm and a 13mm wrench. Tighten the threaded fitting in the proportioning valve using a 10mm wrench. Next, install the front section of the right rear LinesToGo line labeled 06A into position and start the front threaded fitting into the top forward port in the proportioning valve by hand. Start the threaded union noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection and tighten using a 10mm and a 13mm wrench. Tighten the threaded fitting in the proportioning valve using a 10mm wrench. Replace the plastic tray underneath the vehicle. Please note, there are 2 remaining lines included in this set that are not required for vehicles with rear disc brakes. If you are installing this set of lines on a vehicle with rear drum brakes, these lines will be installed between the rear flex hoses and the wheel cylinders. The line labeled 05C will be installed at the left rear, and the line labeled 06E will be installed on the right rear. Next, use a 10mm wrench to bleed both rear wheels, making sure to keep the master cylinder reservoir topped up with fluid. Replace both rear wheels and tighten to your manufacturer's recommended specification using a 19mm socket. Reconnect the negative battery terminal and tighten using a 10mm wrench. This concludes the installation of stainless steel rear brake lines on a 2001 Honda Accord using LinesToGo part number BL-1108-SS. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or would like to purchase the lines you saw today, please call us at 1-855-781-5992. Email us at info@linestogo.com or check out our website link below. And don't forget to take advantage of our free 2-day shipping. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below, and we will see you on our next video.